Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for logging into our webinar today. My name is TJ Cantwell. I'm the Executive Director of the NCCCO Foundation. At the NCCCO Foundation, we are working to improve the crane industry for everyone working in the load handling field by enhancing safety through research, education, and workforce development programs. You can learn more about the Foundation programs, our research reports, and future webinars at ncccofoundation.org. Today, as part of our educational webinar series, we'll be discussing rigging training programs, their importance, and ways to strengthen them to enhance safety and add value. I'll be acting as the moderator. We'll conduct a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar, so if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A box as we go, and we'll address as many as possible during the Q&A portion at the end. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded so we can share with others. Our two great speakers today are Katie Brittain and William Hank Dutton. I want to provide a brief biography for each of them before we get started. Katie Brittain, CSP ASP, is the rigging and lifting safety manager at MC Dean, where she leads safety strategy, risk management, and field execution for complex lift and logistics operations supporting mission-critical infrastructure projects. Katie applies a hands-on, technically detailed approach to ensure safe and efficient heavy lift operations. She is CCO Rigger Level 1 and Signal Person certified. She also achieved expert level certification in 3D lift planning software. Kaitlin leads by example, mentoring peers, promoting inclusivity, and improving the technical excellence and safety leadership transcend stereotypes. Our second speaker today is Hank Dutton. Hank has been in the construction industry for over 35 years. He started his career with a large general contractor as a project safety director and has been employed at Travelers for the last 30 years. In his current role as senior technical specialist for crane and rigging, Hank is responsible for the crane and rigging training products offered by Travelers. Hank is a CCO certified lift director for mobile cranes. He also, he has authored several training programs used by Travelers and actively volunteers for the NCCCO on several committees, including its board of directors. Hank is an alternate on ASME B30 main committee and is a past member of the Association of Crane and Rigging Professionals. Welcome to each of you. On behalf of myself and our audience, I want to say thank you to taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. So now let's get into it. Katie and Hank, please provide us with some background, and then I have a few questions to kind of pick your brains. But please start with the background that you guys want to share with the audience related to rigging.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start. Thank you, TJ. Hey, everyone. Again, my name is Katie, and I work for MC Dean. So I'll start with a little bit of background on MC Dean. At MC Dean, we're building intelligence. So we design, build, operate, and maintain cyber physical solutions for the nation's most recognizable mission-critical facilities, secure environments, complex infrastructure, and global enterprises. So we're continually growing our workforce with over 7,000 employees, including 30 plus people on our logistics and rigging team. And as we continue to scale up, we're working on ensuring that our program is strong and growing with the industry. TJ, if you want to head to the next slide for me. So what you can see here is some of the bread and butter for our logistics and rigging team at MC Dean. And while we're not a crane company, we do spend a lot of time in the same space. Our lifts have to be incredibly precise and delicate. The lift on the left, for example, had very specific clearance requirements. We only had a couple inches to play with, and it had to be done in an urban environment. So all that being said, we have to ensure that our team is trained appropriately to handle the expectations of MC Dean, as well as our client expectations, because there's absolutely no room for mistakes or damage to any equipment. If you want to go to the next slide, TJ. So some of the ways that we do that at MC Dean, our top leadership has driven a very expansive culture that's focused on safety and excellence, where we really believe in investing in our people. So with our team growing and our mission critical clients needing the best of the best, ensuring our training standards are up to par has been a really important focus. we're operating with the goal of growing our employees into lift directors and then stationing a lift director at each specific project. So having our progression laid out this way ensures that all riggers, operators, and lift directors are familiar with our products and the way that we do business. And we want to ensure that people that are coming in with little to no experience are started out with the basics and we can grow them where they want to be. Or if someone comes in with some previous experience, which is really awesome, we can fit them into our program and ensure that they are well rounded through some cross training. So, our goal is that we have every rigger certified, every operator confident, and every lift directed by trained professionals. Next slide, TJ. So, some of the ways that we do that is through a basic rigging training that all new logistics and rigging employees, regardless of experience, sit through. So here are some of the ways that we do that training. These slides are a couple of examples of what we show people. And we cover recognizing hazards in our specific environment, elements of rigging specific to what we use, as well as information on inspections and some of the basic stuff. So it kind of helps to orient people to our specific setups, like our specific slings, our specific hardware, as well as gives people a great refresher who may already be familiar with the information. Everybody can learn how to reinspect slings or reinspect shackles. It's always good to have that background. TJ, if you want to head to the next slide. So one of the ways that we do train is we build activities into our training, such as a signaling activity. So we took a fishing pole and a kayak mount and attached a bolt to the end. TJ, if you want to hit the next picture. Might lag a little bit. So what we do is we kind of use this activity to help people understand why it's so important to give proper signals and why those signals need to be from the operator's perspective. So TJ, if you can hit one more time for me. So this allows people, if they're struggling with the concept of how to give proper signals, we can allow them to operate the fishing pole or the crane. And it's a fun activity that gets everybody engaged. And we can do this in a controlled environment, regardless of weather conditions, which is really nice. And it allows for people to understand how to give proper signals to tell the operator where exactly we want to put something. Go ahead to the next slide for me. All right, sorry. I was showing you guys where the bolts were. All right, so as you saw, we progress people from signal person, telehandler up to rigger 1 and rigger 2, and then we go through crane operator and then finally lift director. And because we do such specialized rigging at MC Dean, our guys are experts in a small amount of topics, but certifications in general cover a broad amount of topics. So we want to make sure that our team is set up for success when we put them through these NCCO certifications. So we've worked with US training and consultants to create this basic rigger knowledge placement exam, and that helps tell us where people are at in their rigging education. And then we go from there and can give people either a more in-depth background of rigging or give them a quick overview before we set them up for that NCCO Rigger 1 or Rigger 2 certification to ensure that everybody is on the same page and they know kind of a broad idea of what's out there and how to apply these concepts. And another thing we do is we give them that little red handbook that's down on the front of the slide. So if you want to go to the next slide, TJ. We also do hands-on experience. Hands-on experience is very, very important as part of our training operations. So we do have people paired up to learn how to use the telehandler if we're going to set them up for the telehandler certification. We also want to make sure that when we put people out in the field that they are comfortable working around the equipment they're going to be working with, that they understand how that equipment operates so they know how to work safely around it. And we want to make sure that our riggers are very comfortable with the cranes as well so that they understand when they're asking a crane operator to do something, they have a basic idea of what they're asking that crane operator to do. So that way we ensure that we're maintaining our radiuses and we're keeping our lifts safe. And next slide. So this is where Hank will take over from me.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, TJ, for the opportunity to talk to everyone. Um, First and foremost, everybody's probably thinking, why insurance? Why an insurance person? Bring everybody sort of up to speed. Travelers is one of the largest writers of insurance, whether that be workers' comp, equipment coverage, general liability. We write many different coverages. And so the unit that I'm specifically in, construction, energy, and marine, we cover a lot of construction accounts. Energy meaning that could be wind turbine, that could be solar, that can also be oil and gas that we have out there. And then we also have ocean in our category. So we've got a pretty wide array of types of accounts that actually use rigging. And so your next question is probably, well, why would an insurance carrier really care? Well, because these claims are not cheap. And many of these accidents that we actually hear about that are categorized in industry as crane accidents, many of them are occurring below the hook. So this is really where rigging comes in and makes it a very important topic. So it's not just about the crane operator, it's also what goes on below the hook. And these types of accidents, when they occur, they can actually affect many of those coverages that we're talking about. When something falls out of the sky, you may have multiple lines of coverage from builder's risk to general liability to workers' comp to the equipment all being affected. And so yes, we do actually have a vested interest in that. And so one of the things that I guess I want to bring to you is, thinking about resources that you actually have at your disposal. Obviously, travelers, we have many different resources, as you heard, that we actually offer on the crane and the rigging side. We've got everything from online courses, we have technical bulletins, we also have everything up to a 4.5 day course. And so we try to partner with our insureds to make sure that they can ensure that the safety of their employees and the safety of their lifts. Another area that I would encourage you to explore when you're starting to look for resources and assistance is associations. There's a lot of really good associations out there that pertain to the crane and rigging industry. Specialized Carriers and Riggers Association, Associated General Contractors of America, ABC, Associated Builder Contractors of America. And then there's also safety associations out there that can also help to give you some information. And then independent consultants, they're definitely out there. There's plenty of them out there. I would encourage you to make sure to explore the one that you may be thinking about using and ensure that they have an understanding of your business and they have a thorough understanding of what type of lifts you make, what type of rigging that you actually utilize, as well as what your footprint is across the country so that they can better assist you with your operations. So, TJ, that's really what I want to, I guess, bring to them to start with is just, some things they can begin to do to look at their own programs.
Thanks, Hank, and Katie, for the background. So let's dig into what I'm sure everybody wants to talk more about, which is to pick your brains about some of the things that you've been doing and what you've seen and some advice that you might have or recommendations you might have for folks related to the rigging programs. But again, I appreciate that context, kind of your expertise and all the things that you guys are doing for your different positions to be able to help educate folks on rigging. So let's start with the basics for those who may be just looking for some simple things, which is, if you're someone looking to start a new rigging training program or maybe improve an existing program that you're like, I'm not sure this is up to par what it should be for your company, where would you recommend starting and why, Hank?
Okay. Excellent question. Sometimes the hardest part is to get started. So the first place I would encourage you to do is to actually look internal to start with at what you already have. What training program do you have and what needs of your employees? And if we break that down, the program that you may have, you may say, well, we've had this one here for years. Well, maybe it's stale. Maybe it doesn't actually still address the exposures that you have. Maybe it does not address the level of employee that you're currently hiring. As we all know, trying to find enough qualified employees right now is a challenge in our industry. And so you may have some employees that are at the upper end of their career and they're actually looking to retire, and yet you've got a whole bunch of new people that are coming in. And so your training program should really reflect your personnel. And if you're offering the same training program time and time again, I guess I would suggest, think of yourself as that employee that has to sit through that. Are you really going to be paying attention as you go through it numerous times? So try to make it lively, try to actually add flavor to it, try to make sure that it reflects currently what you're actually using in the field.
Great. Katie, anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is if you are struggling with where to start, call an expert in the field and ask, because you don't know what you don't know. So there might be some piece of a program that would incredibly benefit you. And if you don't know that it exists, you don't know how to implement it. So bringing in somebody like the people that Hank mentioned would be a great way to help either get started or help improve a current program.
Great. No, appreciate that. Those are good pieces of advice. Um, so realizing that obviously all companies should be providing basic safety training to all of their employees as a basic entry level kind of thing. How do you determine who needs to get rigor training? Katie, maybe start there. Like, how does MC Dean really look to see, like, everybody's going to get basic safety, but what about rigor training? Like, who how do you decide who gets that?
Safety training is very near and dear to my heart, so it's very important. And trying to decide who exactly is going to get rigor training is part of what you need to assess in your program. So it's important to understand who's doing what job and where. In our case, anybody that touches rigging or does any kind of rigging where they use slings or they maybe use an overhead gantry crane, they're all going to go through some kind of rigging training, whether it's basic rigging training or we get them certified to our NCCO Rigger 1 standards. We want to make sure that if they are going to be performing some kind of activity that is related to rigging, that they understand what they're working with. So that way we don't have any issues. And I know Hank can add to that.
Always got something to add, right, Katie? I can talk
Yep.
up a storm here. So I want to bounce right off of something that you said that's very key. Anyone who touches rigging, I mean, that is the great place to start. If you expect someone to select rigging, if you expect someone to help with rigging, if you expect them to be in the operation, then that means that they need to have rigging training. I like to think of this training as Katie's done with MC Dean. You've got basic and then you've got more advanced training, and everybody, including management personnel, including safety personnel, including supervisors that are expected to oversee these operations, everybody should have the same basic level of understanding, because that's going to actually help your program go further. And then, of course, those people who are expected to lead the operation and the ones that are actually in the field performing the operation, then they probably need a little bit more. But this is also one of those topics that I like to think that this can go all the way into your management side, as far as like even estimators. Do we even know what type of rigging it is that we're trying to buy? Do we understand the cost of things? Do we understand the supply chain of things that we may need? Because as Katie showed in several of their operations, rigging can be very complex. It can be very simple.
Nice. And Katie, just to follow on one of your things there, I mean, so you sounds like both you and Hank believe, people that are involved in rigging should be, if or they may be involved in rigging in any capacity, should get some kind of training. Just I assume there's different variations when you assess people or looking at them. Like some might might figure it out pretty easily, and some might take a little bit more time. Is that, yeah, kind of been your experience, Katie, in terms of ways to approach people in terms of the training that you do?
Absolutely. Part of training is making sure that you're meeting people where they're at. So if there's a concept that somebody is struggling with, maybe approaching it from a different way. Like the way that we do the signal person training, sometimes just sitting and looking at slides is okay for people. And then other times it just does not connect until you put them in a room and you tell them to put that little bolt into a cup and they can't see the cup and they need to have somebody's signals to follow. So it's just finding a way to help, again, meet where they're at. And usually, if people are going to be involved in some kind of rigging operation, most of the time that's going to be identified ahead of time so we can make sure that they have the training that they need.
Gotcha. Great. Yeah, and your example of the fishing pole is pretty interesting and unique, and that's a good example of trying to help people that may not be as visual a learner, right? Or they want to, hands on, and you have to get them right out into the field already to at least get some experience at that. So I appreciate you sharing that with everybody. Um, Hank, are there common problems related specifically to rigging that you've seen? I'm sure there are, so I'm giving leading a little bit here, but and if so, obviously, do you have any recommendations for ways to address those common problems?
I guess the first thing that probably comes to my mind is not necessarily unique to rigging, but I would say it's unique to a lot of things that we do in our industry, and that is accountability. So even though we're talking about training that needs to be provided to employees and we provide them gear, if we don't hold them accountable to what it is that we actually train them on, then that's obviously going to lead to problems across all safety facets. Katie and I basically coming from the safety side of this to look at this topic right now is, it's great you got a safety program, it's great you did training, but if you turn these folks out into the field and you don't hold them accountable to the training, that's going to lead to some problems down the road. So looking at your program at what that accountability looks like. And a lot of times people think accountability, oh my gosh, I got to get rid of my employees. I already don't have enough of them. No, it actually may be that you didn't meet them where they were. So maybe you need to put them back through training. Maybe the type of training you gave them actually did not resonate with them. You mentioned a couple key words there earlier, TJ, about visual and hands-on. A lot of adults are visual learners and they learn better hands-on. So you can put them through some training in a book and they may not necessarily grasp it. You take them out in the field, you let them do hands-on, and now they may grasp it. So I like to blend accountability also includes that continuous training. It includes that meeting them where they are and making sure that they comprehend what it is that you're given so that you're not just talking to the employees, you're actually engaging those employees and ensuring that they understand because rigging is a dangerous business. When it goes wrong, it can really go wrong. So, I like for people to step back, think about what did you provide them? Did you give them the training that they needed, or did you give them what you thought they needed? Katie had mentioned about meeting these folks where they are. Some folks, it probably sounds bad, but they just probably really will never be a great rigger. That doesn't mean they can't do anything for you. You just probably shouldn't put them in that role. You got to find something else that they can execute better at. And rigging is one of those. If they're not visual, if they don't understand how to think out ahead, maybe it's just not for them. So I guess I would attack this from a accountability standpoint. The next side that I would encourage you to look at is the tools and equipment. You say, what type of problems do I see? Sometimes I see people have a very good program, but they don't provide the quality equipment. They don't provide the right tools for the employees to do the job. So we tell them what we want them to do, but then we don't give them the necessary tools or the tools we've given them. They're not inspected, they're not quality. And so then that's going to lead to problems also. So I think that's where management, that's why I like for management to come through these classes. Management needs to understand what their role is. It's not just all on the employee, it's also at a management level.
Great. Anything to add on that, Katie?
Yeah, I think to also kind of add on to what Hank said, if assessing your people is so important, especially as management, and assessing what tasks you're trying to complete, because again, people don't know what they don't know. And part of what I'm hoping that we can do through this webinar and through these series is educate people on what is out there. Because I've been going through several different trainings. Hank, I've gone through your crane training. I've gone through some rigging training. And I have found that sometimes people go through these classes because they're just looking to start something. They've been doing a task a certain way and they realize that there might be a better way. And they're kind of relying on, learning some more information to make sure that they do better. Bounce some things off of other professionals, make sure that they have their program or that task that they're performing is the correct way to perform it, the safest way to perform it.
Great points. Yeah. So I totally understand where you guys are coming from, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Not there's not a there's not a one size fits all right? Got to really look at what you're doing and make your training, to your point earlier, Hank, not only interesting, but like actually fit the level of the person that you're talking to and making sure that they're the right, that they're going to be right for it in general. And if they are, then how can you make sure they're really driving home the points that are important? So speaking of that, I mean, you started off talking, Hank, and Katie talked about kind of the critical list that you have, the kind of no room for error. It's a very high stake. Rigging is a very high stakes and important both for your company and I think in general for safety. As you were talking about, Hank, can you talk a little bit more about like what you mean by that in terms of safety? Like what it means that if you have an error in for MCD and Katie, if rigging goes wrong, obviously there's maybe a safety aspect, which Hank, you might be able to speak to what you've seen happen there. But like, from a business aspect too, is there any impact if poor training, poor rigging training, what does that really, cost you at the end of the day?
Yeah, so there's a lot that we could peel this onion back and actually talk about. When we talk about rigging being high stakes, it can be high stakes for the employee. So we could have employee injury all the way through fatality. We can have high stakes in the regard of business interruption. So if we're raising a piece of equipment up in the air and that piece of equipment gets dropped, many times we're dealing with long lead time items. So we're talking months, if not years, to actually get a piece replaced. And so there's a cost impact to a project site. There's a reputational risk that goes into this right here. Obviously nobody wants to work around somebody that's known to drop things. So having qualified employees so that we actually are training those employees, we're qualifying them, and we can rest assured that we've actually got people that do understand what goes on below the hook. As I say many times with cranes and rigging, there's really no such thing as a cheap accident. Everyone, including a near miss, there's something that needs to be learned from it. And the near miss is the one that you actually got away with. That's the one that you really need to learn with, because if you have the actual accident and now you've got a business interruption situation, you've affected the public in some sort of way. If you've injured someone in the public, all of these things right here begin to affect insurance, and they also affect your own company as far as reputational. They affect your company in the future potentially with cost of insurance, availability of insurance. It can affect your view in front of owners. Okay, because even owners are interested in what your skill set is when they're actually beginning to hire. So I think of it definitely. It's a high stakes event. It's not just okay. It's another set of slings. It's another load here. Every load counts.
Right, and every lift is important, right? Not just one lift you take off the time, and other the next one you're like, all right, now I'll pay attention. Right,
Yeah.
every lift is important. And Katie, Hank was talking about the kind of reputational and business aspect to it too. Have you seen that with MC Dean in terms of how much effort you guys have been putting towards your training program?
Absolutely. Reputation is everything, especially with the data center work that we do in these mission critical environments. We cannot afford a mistake. Not only do we not want to harm our employees, because employee safety is number one, but we also need to make sure that all the stuff that we're putting in this data center that we've spent months and months to build is put in there in one piece. So we consider lifting and rigging, anything lifting and rigging, as a very high risk activity, and make sure that we talk through every lift. Even if we do the same lift 30 times, for each project, every lift, we talk about every lift to make sure that we know what is going into it, how it needs to happen. It's one of those sticky things, lifting and rigging is, in a nice way, stuff that could kill you, right? If something falls. So want to make sure that everything is planned, every movement is tracked, everything is accounted for.
Katie's operation, TJ, is a really good example of, people always think about things falling. It doesn't even have to fall. If you start banging around some of this, precision equipment, you're picking up an MRI magnet, you're picking up some of these modules that they're building in the data center world. You can't even afford to even have it just touch the ground hard. You can't afford for it to be banging into walls when you're trying to guide it into an opening. So it's definitely precision work. It's not just swing it around and let it fall somewhere. It's definitely precision.
Right, right. And then, and just even if it's just a steel beam, right? It's swinging around and going too far one direction is probably not the best case scenario for anybody, or having it rigged incorrectly can lead to some major issues. So Katie, you mentioned that your, rigging training doesn't stop with just giving people the basics, but you want them to level, you want to level them up, I guess is the best way to say it. So, so much so that you at an MC Dean, want to make sure that they get their NCCCO Rigger 1 certification, and in some cases even Rigger 2, I guess. And at some places that's really considered above and beyond, right? There's like, well, we qualify, we do some training, and then we qualify our folks, because certification for riggers, isn't actually required by OSHA like it is for crane operators. But so I'm curious, kind of, that's you are going a little bit above and beyond that in that sense. So why does MC Dean think getting certification, is an important step of your training program?
Because we want our training program to be best in class, TJ. We want to make sure that we are the best of the best and that we are giving our clients 100% every single time. Our clients also expect us to have, the most up-to-date certifications and abide by industry standards. And part of the reason why we put people through these rigging certifications and the crane operator certifications is to make sure that our programs are also doing what they're supposed to do. So we make sure it's kind of like a back check to make sure, hey, yeah, we are still doing really fantastic with industry standards. Our employees are incredibly confident in what they're doing. They know how to do it. And not only are they capable of performing our specialized work, but they have enough general knowledge in the industry to be able to perform in other aspects as well. And part of what we do in our progression is our crew leaders are the ones that go through the Rigger 2 certification. We want to make sure that when we have these complex lifts that they have a very solid understanding of rigging practices. So they're the ones that are, in charge and leading.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And so, Hank, from kind of the insurance or general business and safety perspective, what value do you see in striving for companies like MCD that strive for rigor certification, as potential at the end of their rigor training program?
So I guess the key word that comes to my mind there is differentiation. It's a great way to differentiate yourself from your competitors. There are many owners, as Katie said, there's many owners out there that are now requiring certification, CCO certification for riggers, for signal persons. And it's not always a requirement when you look at across the country. It's not like it's mandated within the federal standard. And so what it does is it really shows that you're actually going above and beyond. You're more than just the minimum. You're actually willing to take it the extra level. You're trying to ensure your employees understanding of a topic. And so it's a great way of differentiating yourself from your competitors. Even in the insurance world, I mean, you don't always want to be measured against your competitors. If your competitors you think are worse than what you are, and you can say, hey, look, here's what we do in addition to what a minimum standard says. As everyone sitting on the call today understands, OSHA is a bare minimum. So all because OSHA doesn't require it, that doesn't mean you can't do something in addition, because it really is about making sure your employees go home at the end of the day, and it's also about making your job site safe. And that certification process is a great way of adding another feather in your cap to say, hey, we've actually gone the extra mile. We do something in addition that's not necessarily a requirement for us.
Gotcha. So, and to follow up on that, I know some may think that qualification and some experience is really just the equivalent or just as good as having certification. When from again like kind of an insurance or business point of view, are they really the same thing? As far as qualification versus certification?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. So there's definitely some differences. Certification being administered by a third party like CCO definitely gives you some, you got an accredited exam so that you can easily, portray to other people that it's not your exam, and so it's written by industry professionals. experts, subject matter experts. Defensibility comes into mind, because it's not your program. You can look at it from the outside, if you're trying to, get other people to see the value of it. Definitely employees, it helps them in the sense that they can actually take it from job to job. As we know, a lot of our employees are definitely transient as they move from town to town or, location to location. There's some value in it for them. But I guess the other thing that I would add is that, certification is still part of that qualification, right? It's one of those steps of getting to the point where you know what it is that your employees know and you're measuring it against an industry standard. Many companies that create their own programs, they don't necessarily know what it measures against.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And Katie, just to follow up on that, have Hank mentioned the employee kind of perspective on it. From your perspective, the people that you've gone through your rigging program and have ended up getting the rigger one or even rigger two in some cases certifications, what has been their I guess experience with it, or like what's been their reaction to be able to get those certifications?
So, in my experience, the reaction has been very positive because it allows for them to show us that they are very confident in what they're doing. And because of the way that we've set up our program, it's kind of turned into a good natured ribbing. If somebody needs to get the certification, their coworkers will be like, hey, man, like, when are you going to get that Rigor 1 certification? Come on, what are you doing? So we've kind of created the culture around these certifications are the standard to achieve.
Gotcha, gotcha. That makes sense. So before we go to the kind of Q&A, there's several questions that people have been asking, so I want to make sure we get into that. But just before we get into that, Katie, are there any other things that you wanted to mention that MCD does for your rigor training that you believe are unique or potentially could be helpful to others developing or trying to improve their rigging training?
Yeah, I think the slides that I presented, I think you guys should go back and look through those. Some of the things that we do that's a little bit unique is the way that we introduce people to our program because we are so specialized in what we do. Having people go through that basic rigging program that we've put together and then having them do that hands on portion with the current crew helps make sure that everybody is ready to go, that we're all on the same page, and finding new ways to introduce activities and allowing people that hands on, as Hank said, adults need to learn hands on. It helps it stick a little bit better from what I've seen. I don't want to just put somebody in a room that's used to working out in the field. Like, we need to give them, something that they can touch, something that they can do that's going to be the best way for them to learn. So I think that that's what we do that's a little bit unique.
Nice. And Hank, anything else you want to add in terms of before we get to the Q&A, in terms of rigging training programs and suggestions for recommendations for developing improving one or developing one from the start?
I mean, I think Katie sort of hit the nail on the head. To me, it's about making your training program specific to your operations. You can have generic training that takes care of part of the topic, but when you start dealing in the variety that exists in the rigging world, all because you train somebody on the topic of rigging does not necessarily ensure success. So being able to make it specific to your operation, use real world examples, use the exact rigging that you expect for your employees to select and use on a daily basis. And if you introduce something new into the process, that you ensure that they have the training necessary. Our industry, like many, we're very good at when you ask somebody, do they understand? They're like, yeah, 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 oh, yeah, I got it. Or if you try to find somebody that doesn't understand something is probably a harder task for you. So making your training have a real world element, make it specific, and make sure that it has hands-on demonstration so that somebody can actually watch this. Like we do with a lot of things in the safety world, pairing people up when we bring new people into the industry, pairing them up with more experienced people hopefully they have not bad habits, but we pair them up with the right, more experienced person so that we can actually foster their knowledge. We can actually give them somebody to bounce things off of. Not literally, we don't want to be dropping loads and bouncing them. So we want to make sure that our new employees that are coming into the industry, that they actually do see the value of coming in the industry and staying in the industry, because rigging is a big part of the crane and rigging industry, obviously.
Gotcha. Great. Well, thank you guys for answering my questions. Now let's go to a couple questions that come in online here. So one question here is, have you used, and Hank, you'll probably be familiar with ADDIE model in your training development? So ADDIE, the ADDIE model?
The last time I heard that was out of Chris Smith. Chris is going to have to remind me what that is, because me and Chris have talked about that before. And if he ain't the one, Chris has already bled it over onto somebody else. I'm actually going to have to defer on that right now, because I've got to remember what that acronym actually stands for. That's an acronym
Okay.
for training. But I can actually say that at least within our training program, we actually do have a training development group. So we actually have education learning professionals and all that actually participate in our training program development. In addition to what we do from a subject matter expert, we do actually try to make it well rounded. Now, from a traveler standpoint, our training is not going to be as comprehensive as what Katie is, because when you get to the employer level, obviously they have way more that they need to do versus what we would actually just bring to them.
Gotcha. And so maybe a different way to ask that question, or I'll ask it more generally, which is kind of when you do your trainings or things related to rigging and training, things like that, do you give everybody a book and then just say read your book, or is there somewhat like, kind of how do you guys, mix it up?
Well, I mean, I can speak for me, and then Katie can definitely talk about theirs, because she's got their training program that they run. When we do our training does actually come with some sort of a participant manual. Our training is primarily going to be classroom based, and then we consult with the employer to make sure that they understand that they have the hands-on piece, that that's their responsibility, and that's where we actually refer them to industry associations, consultants, or even their own people. There's lots of organizations and companies that are out there that actually help and gladly do training on the hands-on front. So from a traveler standpoint, that's not an area that we will generally participate. We will advise, we will definitely give opinions of, but we don't generally participate in.
And to add on to that, if the ADDIE's model is what I'm thinking it is, which is, you analyze your needs, you design what that training should look like, you develop the content, and then you kind of implement it and then evaluate how that training is going.
There you hit it, Kate.
I'm building on a program that has existed. Our training program continues to evolve, especially as MC Dean does. So they did a lot of that previously, and now what I'm doing is helping to make sure that we're continually developing that program, continually making sure that we're evaluating people, evaluating our program to make sure that it's doing what it needs to do in the industry. And we do some book work. I don't have like an actual book like Hank does. Mostly we've got some PowerPoint slides, but I do have a bunch of rigging that I bring in and I let people touch stuff. So
All right, great. Yeah, so a variety of different things.
Yeah.
Hank, here's one for you. What are the greatest risk factors and rate of incidents based on your experience?
Wow. Greatest risk factors. I guess the first
Related to
place that I'm
rigging.
going to start with that, let's break that in half, because there's really two components to that question. Greatest risk factors. One of your greatest risk factors is going to be employee error, because rigging is it is an employee task, right? So we've got the employee, and then we've got the rigging itself. And just like a lot of things that we actually see in our industry, there's this operator error type mindset. And so focus on the employee is definitely a great place to begin. Going back to some of the things that we talked about, having a training program that meets people where they are, that you actually not only are providing them with some sort of, let's call it book knowledge, but you are actually giving them hands-on knowledge, and you are assessing that knowledge. Going back to that ADDIE model, Now, thank you for bailing me out, Katie. It was one of those brain lapses there. So being able to make sure your program is designed for the employees that you expect and that you're evaluating that program. That's probably how I would answer that. The greatest risk is going to be in that. Rate of incidents, I would say, obviously working for an insurance company, we actually get to see many different things, but obviously I do not see everything. I would say that varies. It varies by industry. It varies by size of account or size of company. It varies by what it is that the individuals are doing. So there's really a lot of different things. But I generally, when I'm talking about this topic of rate of incidents, I'm really trying to get people to understand crane accidents and rigging accidents, things that occur below the hook versus with a crane. Because many times you'll hear, obviously, watching the news or whatever, that there's a crane accident. And the reality is nothing with the crane, everything occurred below the hook, which points to our topic of today and that why it's so important, right? Strengthening your rigging training program to make sure that you're addressing this stuff before something happens.
Right. And you alluded to the fact that I mean, there is a lot of that part below the hook stuff, right? That may have a direct impact even on what ends up being termed as a crane accident, right?
Absolutely.
And that's not really where it generated from or started from, but addressing the rigging part could potentially relieve the ultimate crane accident that might happen.
Absolutely.
Um, so there's a question here that goes back to kind of your management discussion, Hank, which is, and I'd love to get Katie's thoughts on kind of the management side of it, which is, the question is really, have you found that the management or the lack of training of management can often or can provide can have them often fail to provide the right rigging for the job. So, their lack of understanding may lead to not giving the people that are doing the rigging maybe the right tools or equipment that they need.
I hate to answer things with absolutes, but my initial response is absolutely. When management does not understand, when things feed from the top down, that's definitely going to lead to problems. I mean, I can look at the training that I do with our insureds, day over day, week over week, year over year. And one of the things that we definitely focus on is ensuring, or at least discussing with our insureds, that they are involving their management in the training, that this is not just about training the craft. I think we do a fairly decent job in our industry of training the craft people, but when the person above them in management does not understand, I would definitely echo that that's going to lead to problems. It's going to lead to not only problems of them providing the right rigging, it's going to lead to problems with selection, it's going to lead to problems potentially with inspection, it's going to lead to problems with application. So yeah, once it starts, it's like a domino. So I'm a fond fan of management needs to understand they should participate in the same trainings that everyone else does. That way they have the eyes and ears of the same process because many times they are the ones that are controlling it. And so I like for those individuals to participate in training.
And Katie, from the MC Dean perspective, in terms of management, I'm sure that there's a top-down perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fully agree with Hank that management should have a general understanding of what's going on. They don't need to know like the nitty-gritty, but they do need to have an understanding of the concept at the very least. So that way when they ask us to perform a task or perform a job, they have an understanding of what they're asking us to perform so that they can make sure that we have the right tools.
Gotcha. So there's a couple of questions here related to kind of more specific, we're looking for resources for specific kinds of trainings and things like that. So I want to kind of put them in a bigger group here, which is, and Hank, you talked a little bit about this in your opening remarks. But somebody's kind of asking for resources related to training for a lift director, or lifting in general or things like that. And I'm just kind of, curious again, you know, where would somebody look for, if they want to get training resources, for rigging or for other aspects of the crane profession and stuff, and are they for instance, does, Travelers have things like that? Is it really outside organizations that do those kind of things, training companies, or, what would you, kind of point them, what direction would you point them?
So training resources. I mean, I can speak for travelers. The resources that we have are for people that we actually insure, for companies that we insure, and we try to make sure that we offer a breadth of resources, from online resources to technical bulletins to in-person training classes. As I mentioned, associations are always a very good place to actually link up to, because many of them have libraries and they have resources that are available. Another one that I probably failed to mention earlier, especially around the topic of rigging, is your rigging supplier. Rigging suppliers are a great place to go get training, especially when you're buying the rigging from them. And this topic that we're talking about, making it specific, that's a great place. So rigging, there's going to be, those avenues. You mentioned the word lift director. That's definitely one of the areas out there of where there's not really, what I would call, that I know of, tons of books that are actually written to that topic. I mean, the resources that CCO has on their website, when you look at the lift director exam, when we look at the domain report, it'll give you ideas of topics, and there's resources that are listed there, from ASME standards to book publications that are actually used by the subject matter experts when they're actually creating those exams.
Gotcha, great. I appreciate that. And Katie, there's one here for you. What information in your training program do you feel has the greatest impact as the rubber hits the road? As this person asked it, But yeah, what's having the greatest impact of the things that you guys are putting together and related to your trading, your rigging training?
Yeah, so I do want to add one more before I answer that to Hank. Your regional safety organization. So, for example, where I'm located in Virginia, that's the Chesapeake Regional Safety Council. They also have training on rigging and concepts like that. So, if there are any questions, whatever region you're in has a safety council that may be able to help direct you as well.
Great.
So, for us at MC Dean, I think the most impactful thing that we've done is continue to evaluate our training program, continue to change it up to make sure that it's actually giving them, our guys, the information that they need. So I personally take all the training that we put our guys through, so that way I understand the information that they're getting, and then that way I can help prep people for going through that same path. And it allows for me to understand what I'm asking them to do. And one of the things that really hit was that fishing pole exercise. I got that from one of the trainings that I did at the Chesapeake Regional Safety Council. It was something that we talked about as a group, and we were talking about how to teach signaling. Somebody suggested, hey, what about a fishing pole? And everybody was like, oh my God. So when I came back to MC Dean and I brought some of the stuff that I learned from that organization, one of those things was that fishing pole exercise. And we had some people who were newer to rigging that didn't quite understand the concept of giving signals. They kept getting confused and they kept giving directions from their perspective and not the operator's perspective. So it was really helpful to be able to put them behind the fishing pole and say, okay, now this is what you're doing to your operator. Like, you need to understand why you have to give signals from their perspective. And we got the whole group involved, and it was a really fun activity for everybody. Everybody was laughing and it stuck. And they still come and talk to me about it occasionally, like, hey, when are we going to use the fishing pole again? So I think that was probably one of the more impactful things that we did, making sure that we have that hands-on component.
Gotcha. Okay. Great. And that kind of leads into one other question we have here. Just kind of both of your thoughts on online training versus in-person hands-on training. Are they equal? Are there pros and cons to either one? And it sounds like, again, you think travelers may have like a little bit of both that they offer. And Katie, looks like, you're doing a lot of hands-on stuff obviously there. So kind of your thoughts on online versus in person.
It's an excellent topic. I was just talking with somebody else about that earlier today. I think online training has a place, but also hands-on has an even bigger place. The online training, I think, is maybe where some companies can accomplish some of the basic information, some of the regulatory type stuff. But for me, I guess being old school, there's really not a replacement for the actual in-person hands-on. Let's go out in the shop, let's go out in the field and actually pick up things that we're expected to pick up. Let's actually use the rigging that we're expected to use. So I think there is a way, especially in today's society. We deal with a lot of people were, that you want it right now type society. So if, we all probably everybody on this call today has participated in some sort of an online training, various topics. So there is an application. And the rigging application, I think it's around the basic knowledge. It's the regulatory type stuff, but the hands-on is really where the skill set's going to come from to actually help people to survive out in the field. And I do think that it takes both. You got to have the book knowledge and you got to have the hands on. If you got one without the other, you're a half a book. So you got to be able to fill both slots.
I'd agree with that. Somebody who's gone and pursued a lot of different training opportunities. Sometimes the only way that you can get that opportunity is through online training. So I won't knock online training, but I agree with you, Hank. I think you lose some of the collaboration and you lose some of the skills when you only take a training online. Nothing substitutes for being able to touch a shackle and put a sling in a shackle. It kind of, I feel like it sticks better when you've put your hands on something and you can feel it, see how something's going to interact. It's very hard to do that in an online setting. Not saying it can't be done. It's just it's a little bit more difficult to get those concepts to stick. Plus, in the generation that we're in now, there's 8 million different things going on when you've got your online training, you've got your cell phone, you've got your emails. So when you're in a room where nobody else can reach you and you're focused on that training, I think that's another benefit to having that in-person connection.
Excellent. So as we kind of wrap up here, I just wanted to again thank both of you for being on. I know there was a couple other questions that we didn't get to. I'm going to offer up that if you have specific questions that I can try to answer, or I'm sure that Hank and Katie, if you want me, I can send them on to you. You can email me at tcantwell@nccccfofoundation.org. And again, I'm happy to forward that information on to you guys, so that questions on to you, and you can, we can try to answer anybody else's questions that we didn't get to. But again, I really want to thank both of you for being with us, and I want everybody to keep an eye out for our future webinars. We are going to be having a monthly educational webinar on a variety of different topics, research and safety and other things throughout 2026. We're going to try to do it monthly. And you can also see our previous webinars on our website at NCCCOFoundation.org. A recording of this webinar will be available next week or so, and I'll send it out to participants. I'm going to also be sending a brief survey shortly here to everybody who attended. So please complete it. So we really welcome your feedback so we can know what other topics you want us to cover and what else we'll be doing to improve the webinar format. So thanks again, Katie and Hank, and thank you to everyone for joining the NCCCO Foundation webinar today. We appreciate you signing in and hope you learned a lot. I know I did. We'll see you next time, and I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
everyone.
Thank you for your time.